Hey guys, this is Patrick again. We're back with another YouTube tutorial, first one in a while, and I promised you guys I'd bring this one back because this specific render got a lot of good feedback, and I really haven't touched the or touched base on the new volume mesher and builder in R20 yet. And for the people who don't have it, you should get it because it's awesome. I know Cinema 4D can be very expensive, but I've been using this volume mesher more than I thought I would, and it's been great so far. And that's another reason why I'm making it like a free tutorial on YouTube, because I feel like not a lot of people have it, but want to kind of know what it is. So thank you to Gabrielle Nemro. I hope that's how you say your name. She got 35 likes on this comment, and I said, she was just like, looks identical to the real ones. Will you make a tutorial for it? And I said, if you get 35 likes, you guys got it. Wasn't that crazy? But I'm a man of my word, so I really don't see why I shouldn't just begin now and make it really snappy. So let's do that. So we're in Cinema 4D here, and this is R20. Of course, we got all the new features highlighted, and really we can just begin here. So it's as simple as what you would think a gummy bear is made of as far as primitives. So we're gonna take a sphere here, and before we actually do that, let's take a let's get these new guys out. Let's take the volume builder and the volume mesher out. So these two will be necessary, obviously, to building and meshing the thing. And I'll try to make it as snappy as possible. Of course, if I'm going a little fast, feel free to pause and go back. But what we're going to do first here is grab the sphere and put it into the volume builder. And you're going to see this guy kind of pop up. Looks almost like a 3D pixelated mesh here, which is kind of what it is. So I'm going to make sure I'm all centered out, which I am on the camera. Of course, our camera, if we jump out of it, is pretty much directly spot on looking at the sphere. And this sphere actually is going to represent our gummy bear head. So let's jump back into it for a second. We can make it a little bit smaller, I guess. And what we'll want to do is, this is nice to work with, but we're going to want something a little less pixelated. So we're going to go to the volume builder, and in the objects tab, we're going to change the voxel size, which is pretty much the resolution, down to 5, and see if that helps. So it's a little more, it's a little easier to see what's going on here. And, you know, why not just drop this guy into the mesher? So now that we have an actual piece of mesh, because if it's not in the mesher, so we're going to go to the standard renderer for a second, and you'll see if I click render, there's nothing because there's no actual geometry. It's just kind of like this pixelated image, but if I were to drag this on the mesher, we have some geometry. So it'll help us work if we work in this mode a little bit more. It will take a little bit more RAM, I guess, on your computer, but for what we're making now, it shouldn't be a problem at all. So we're going to start with this head here. I'm going to move it up, obviously. And the next thing we're going to work on are the ears. So it's as simple as kind of copying and dragging this guy here by holding on to Control or Command on a Mac, I guess. And the next thing we're going to do here is, actually, before you do that, my apologies, what you're going to do is take the original sphere we have and Command Copy, Command Paste, and we're going to drag this on top. And if you want to make this a little more comprehensive, just call it ears. So we have one ear right now in the same position. All we're going to do is grab a, where is it, symmetry object, drag the ear on top of the symmetry, and then drag the symmetry back in the hierarchy. And you'll see when I grab one of the ears, boom, it's 100% symmetrical. Of course, we can slim it down a little bit, do what we need to do. And I'm not going to, take as much time making this bear, but you'll get the idea of kind of how I did it. And this looks good, but the ears are a little too round. Looks like spheres are popping out. So what we'll do is go into the volume builder and click on the top the top asset here in the hierarchy, and click smooth layer, and that'll make sure that this smooth layer is above everything in the hierarchy. So if I go below it, it'll make this layer smooth, but not these guys. So I'll go on top again, and I'll continue moving the ears around where I kind of think they should be, maybe make them a little bit bigger. You can see we're starting to get a little too smoothed out here. And to fix this, we're going to take the volume builder and change the voxel size to maybe 3. Now we're getting a little more detail there. You can see if you go to the lines, from 3 to 5, there's kind of a drastic increase in polygons. So let's go back to 3. Let's go back to regular shading, and that's given us a better start. So we can go a little bit closer to the head here. And remember, this is a gummy bear, so these things are they're not too detailed, which is fine. The next thing we're going to do is really copy and paste, drag up the same symmetry object. And remember, we're working on the ears here. So we're going to hop out of the camera, zoom in. So right now we have two identical symmetry objects kind of on top of each other. And this is where the volume builder gets really cool. So if we drag the smooth layer above everything again, you're going to have to remember to do that every kind of asset you make so that these guys remain in the, remain smoothed out. And you'll see these guys look much more ugly without this smooth layer on. So let's keep that on. And in this top symmetry object, which is the guy we just made, let's go, and instead of union, let's go subtract. Now this looks obviously, this changed everything. We don't want this. But the reason is because these guys are too big and they're literally covering the last symmetry object. So all we got to do is make these smaller and drag them forward. And you can see now we're getting like these little ear shaped things. And depending on what kind of ears you want to make, totally up to you, of course, that's going to be, how you do it. So we can make these a little bit bigger maybe. Drag them a little bit forward, a little bit up maybe. So as long as they got little indents, what have you. And of course, if you want to go back and make them a little bit bigger, drag them forward. Let's see. And if you want them smaller and to give kind of smaller indents in these guys, let's see here. Sometimes if you go back to the volume builder, sometimes the smoothing, they go a little bit crazy. So depending on how smooth you actually want this thing, they should work. So let's grab both the ears here and drag them a little bit of a different spot. So maybe something like that. Of course, I'm eyeballing this. I don't even have a reference in front of me, not even my last render. But they're little ears. So looks good to me. Might be a little off. Let's drag them back. Maybe increase it a little bit. And I guess we can work on the eyes now. So let's grab the same small symmetry object and drag it above. Now we have, physical little balls here, but instead of, the reason they're popping out is because they are set to union and not subtract. So let's grab the eyeballs we just made. Let's take eye, and let's keep track of what's going on here. So these are ears, ear holes maybe. So we got the ear holes, ears, eye, head. And let's take the eye again, and because they're still in a symmetry object, all we got to do is really just drag them where we want it. And we're getting kind of a nice little bear head here. You can see, obviously, this is starting to look a little bit like a kind of somewhat detailed, or somewhat kind of recognizable face. So one may even be able to tell it's a bear already. So what we're going to do is grab a sphere now. This will be, I guess, mouth. Let's drag that into the mix. And if you have a primitive that is not editable yet, that is a circle or a sphere, you can go into the volume builder, click the sphere here, and use perfect primitive, and it'll keep it kind of smooth for you. So let's drag this all the way down. All the way down. And then kind of add a mouth area here. And, that looks pretty good to me, and these also aren't even touched by the smooth layer, so if I were to bring this above everything, they may be a little too smooth for what we need here, so we can keep these below. I'm happy with that. I think the eyes might be able to come a little bit closer. Cool. Looks good to me. That's a little nice bear head. Let's jump into the camera. Looks good so far. Maybe the mouth can slim down a little bit, or maybe even go inside. Let's see. kind of meet in the middle. And I guess so we don't mess with our camera too much, just go to Cinema 4D tags, right click the camera, Cinema 4D tags, and go to protection. Now we can't move the camera no matter what, even if we try in any direction. So I am pretty happy with that. We got ears, nice indents. I think it's time for the body. So naturally, what I would use for a body in this case would probably be a cylinder. Bring this down a little bit, smooth it out. And you guessed it, let's drag it into the hierarchy. Let's go body. Change the name there. And this one might actually want to be affected by the smoothing layer. So let's go just below the smoothing layer. And let's make sure we have height segments on here, because if we're going to kind of bulge this out, which we are going to do, we're going to need some segments. So let's go 10 for the height segments, and let's drop a bulge deformer. So with the body selected, shift and release. So now it is a child of the body, and we'll see if we kind of bulge this guy out, we're getting a little bear figure, or a body. So we can move this down a little bit maybe. Or I'm sorry, this is actually only affecting the displacer, which is still cool if you wanted to give him a little like beer gut or something like that, make him more slim in certain areas. But let's move the whole body down. So that's good for now. Almost looks like a bear bowling pin. If that's what you're going for, that is nice. But let's work on the arms now. So the same kind of deal. We're going to go with a cylinder here. And before we put it in there, let's kind of just map out what's going to happen here. So because we know there's going to be two of them, let's add a symmetry object. And let's go cylinder, or arm rather, into the symmetry object. Put the symmetry object inside of the mix. Or I'm sorry, before we do that, let's have this outside. But now at least, now at least if we take one of the arms, we got two of them. And for this I would actually go and create a fillet here. And maybe take the radius down to like 25. And maybe bring those down a little bit. And I think we're good to go on creating a bend deformer. So shift, hold down. So now the bend deformer is a child of the arm. And watch what happens when we kind of pull these guys. And notice they kind of flatten out. That's not what we want. And the reason being is because they don't have any height segments too. So if we were just make it 10, we're going to have nice little bends here. And this looks pretty good. We just have to place the arm where we think it would fit. So let's take the bend and change the angle a little bit. Something like that. Maybe even bend a little bit more. And then change the arm's rotation to something like that. So we can kind of see this already looks pretty similar to what we're going for. We just need to hop it into the volume builder. So now they're attached to this thing. And of course, you'll notice that sometimes it gets tricky, because if we were to take this below the smooth layer, we want a little bit more defined detail than this. And sometimes you can fix it by taking the arm and kind of moving them apart. But we don't want them to be this spread apart. We want it to be still pretty close to it. So a way of getting around that is possibly taking the volume builder, taking the symmetry, of course, or renaming it, taking the symmetry, of course, possibly renaming it arm so it shows up in the volume builder. And so that's good on as far as the distance and a little bit of detail, but we're getting this kind of splotchiness going on here. So what you can do is affect everything by taking a smoothing object and dropping it underneath but above the volume builder. So underneath the mesher, above the builder. So you'll see it helps a little bit with getting, some of the smoothness down, while also keeping good detail. So what we can do is drag these arms maybe a little bit closer, taking the fillet down maybe like 10 for the radius, messing with the let's see, the angle of these guys, maybe making them a little bit slimmer. And we're still, since this is still like an editable, or since this is non-destructive, we can still mess with the exact, what do you call it, the, the radius, and it's not an editable object, so we're able to still edit all this. So let's add this up there. That almost looks good for me. I'm just eyeballing it, maybe a little bit higher up. Looks good to me. And for this, it's super simple. Let's just copy and paste, drag up, and make this leg. So leg. And let's drag the leg down. Of course, if we want to make this a little bit easier so we don't have to really replace everything, just click this button here, and then we can add, we can edit it as if they are kind of zeroed out. And this is good here. Let's change the leg's rotation now. Cool. A little bit lower. And so, let's see. This is actually looking pretty good. So, of course, we can work on some stuff. This looks crazy, like Cheeto Puffs wrapping around the guy. So this always helps to kind of see what we're doing here. So an easy fix could kind of just be taking both arms, taking the height down to maybe 50, and moving both of them up. Maybe taking the bend for both of them and, wrapping them around even more. And we might actually have to add a little bit of height. So let's go like 70. Let's meet in the middle. 65. Take them both, move them forward. So now we kind of fixed that whole deal here. So this is a pretty chunky bear right here. Almost looks like he has a butt. But we can take just the legs maybe and move them forward. Or if anything, move them up. So this is looking good to me. He almost looks a little fat, so maybe we could take the body and maybe taking the radius down to like 30. Oops. And this is starting to look pretty good to me. Arms coming down on him, the legs coming up a little bit like he's sitting down. This might be a little chunky for my liking, but you get the idea. Oops. So if we go back into the camera, it is pretty obvious that this thing is a bear. I think we can actually take the body and move it up a little bit because it looks like it's sticking out of him. And that should be pretty good. Let's take the body up. Maybe slim him down a little bit. Now we're getting the butt cheeks again. If that's what you're going for, by all means, take it up. And I think we can take the legs a little bit and we might be able to take the angle and mess with it actually. There we go. Perfect. So we just mess with the angle there. Angle them up. And the arms, we can probably just keep bending it to bend inside the body and mesh a little better. So this looks good to me. This is a nice little gummy bear here. That's pretty much how I made the other one. Again, if you want to smoothen certain things out or change certain things, it's very easily to manipulate. More detail, less detail, but smoother. And this should be good. So I think we're good to go here. Oops. Let's jump back into the camera. And now that we have everything, we can just kind of, current state to object. And just so we don't have this slow stuff going on, let's take down the volume mesher. Oops. Yeah. So that should be good. So everything's kind of turned off here. Boom. And all we're left with is this guy. Super fast. Nice little gummy bear. And to light this guy, we're going to use ProRender because I haven't really touched on that earlier. Let's just hop on ProRender if you have R19 or R20 and have the hardware available. and let's see what happens here. So let's drag a another view panel here by going to new view panel, and we'll use this one for pro render. So use as pro render view, obviously, and you really don't have to change too many settings on pro render. That's what I like about it. But for the preview, everything should be kind of here standard, and we don't really need depth of field for at least this demonstration. But let's start it up, see how fast it'll start up. Compiling shaders. This part takes time sometimes, so we'll have to see how long this actually takes. Not that bad. And this is, oops, my apologies. We didn't hide this guy from the render view, so let's just hide that. Now we got the nice little gummy bear here. I think certain parts, maybe the legs could be a little bit more smooth, but I think I'm liking what we're seeing here. Looks nice. Nice enough for me, at least. But you guys get the idea. So let's go back to the regular position. Maybe add a plane so we can work on texturing this guy a little bit. And it's super simple with this new subsurface scattering thing. All we got to do is let's move the camera a little bit so we can kind of take this off the protection tag. Let's move the camera maybe a little bit farther out so the gummy bear looks realistically sized. Move that guy up. Boom. And if you want to get kind of crazy with the depth of field, maybe that's a good idea so you can see this gummy bear look even smaller. So let's turn on depth of field. In the camera settings, make sure you got something like a portrait at least, so it's pretty zoomed in. And let's take the f-stop down to like 0.6. Of course, this guy's very blurry now. Let's zoom in. And go to the camera, go object, focus distance, click on the gummy bear. So at least we're getting somewhat of a smaller, shallow depth of field. Let's go like 0.4 maybe. Cool. And then all we got to do is let's drag a material on this thing, on the gummy bear. White. Sometimes this will freeze up your computer a little bit, so watch out. So let's go color off. Luminance on. Takes a tiny bit. We got the luminance. Let's go texture, effects, subsurface scattering. And this is the majority of it, guys. Let's go to reflectance. Let's go reflection. Boom. Turn off the specular. And take the reflection down to 24. And we're not seeing reflection because we have to physically go into the subsurface scattering. And then take this down to like maybe 90. So now we're getting some gloss in there. Maybe get it down to 80. And what we're going to do now is take the scatter color. Let's make a red gummy bear. Boom. So we're looking glossy. We're getting some subsurface scattering, but not enough. So let's go scatter depth. Kind of boost that up to like maybe 104 centimeters. Take the emission, or not the emission, take the depth color. Let's get this guy like a yellowish maybe. So inside, whatever's hitting this thing is looking kind of radiated. And let's go bump. Let's turn some bump on here. Let's get a noise. Shouldn't take too long with this. Sometimes it takes a while to register. So one thing I've learned pretty decently is to not touch this stuff when it is calculating. And I think this is a pro render thing. I've never used Octane. But we'll see how it works. Alright, so finally this thing loaded. That took way too long. We're going to take the bump. We're going to just use a different noise here. Let's just go with something like Nudius. And just anything to make this kind of break up a little bit. Maybe take this to 300. Oops, maybe 200. So anything to kind of break up this gummy bear a little bit. I'm fine with that. And let's see, what do we need here? Let's go back into the reflectance, take this down a little bit, and take the luminance. I think we can boost up the scatter depth even more. To like 288 maybe. And again, let's see, let's go You can also make these things transparent, which is pretty cool. But I don't think that's what we need for this. Let's take that out. Change the, it's all about messing with these values. So, I mean, this is, you can see the phase will mess with kind of how the light hits this thing. And kind of the difference between the scatter color and the depth color. So let's take the depth color and kind of easing up on it with the saturation. And yeah, I mean, that looks good to me. And it helps to have some bright light shining through it. So let's kind of zoom out here and create that bright light. Let's take a plane, rotate this thing 90 degrees, add a light, color channel off. Oops. Yeah, see what I mean? You gotta kind of like let this stuff load every once in a while. Off. Reflectance off. Luminance yes. But of course, I'm pretty sure, at least with Pro Render, you gotta kind of make sure these planes are flipped in the right direction. Let's go minus. And let's go to like 200. Let it load. And let's kind of go back in here. So we're looking pretty good. I like the look of this gummy bear. Of course, if you wanted to like duplicate it and see what they look like next to each other, let's move this plane up. And yeah, I'm not mad at that. You can always duplicate these shaders here and kind of change the color of these guys very easily by going to you know, the scatter color, making it maybe green, yellow, orange, even purple, blue. Let's go to like a blue one. That's nice. So we got some nice subsurface scattering here. If you have some aliasing going on, let's turn on some anti-aliasing in the preview tab. So let's go 1, and you'll notice these hard edges here will go away. So that looks good, and I'm pretty happy with these gummy bears. So we're looking pretty decent there. Maybe for the thumbnail, I'll add maybe a third or something. But these look pretty good. Make it so they're not touching, and kind of get this focus right. And again, this class, you know, it's pretty speedy. I'm not going through everything, but I want to give you guys a general idea of how I got this result here. Maybe enlarge this kind of plane here and create a kind of wall. And bring it back. So let's go coordinates minus 30. Oops. I guess let's go 50. So something like that. Looks pretty good. Looks pretty realistic. And I'm pretty happy with it. So maybe we can change the color of this back one to maybe something like, I don't know, just like a nice, a nice pink maybe, or maybe something like that. But I'm pretty happy with this. We can even take this wall back a little bit. Let's go 100. And yeah, we're pretty good. I don't like having the default color for any of the materials. So let's just drag that. And we can make it a different color. Maybe just darken it a little bit. Cool. So I'm happy with that. Let's take the luminance, maybe bust that up to like 250. Of course, it always takes a little time, but I'm pretty happy with that. Let's take the plane we have here and just drag it back. Cool. So that's kind of how I made it, guys. Simple texturing. It was mostly about modeling these things, so I didn't want to spend too much time doing all that stuff. And so yeah, that's exactly what I did there. And hope you guys enjoyed the class. I know it was speedy again, but I wanted to whip this up for you while I had the time. And hope you guys enjoyed. Take it easy.